Mark, a lot of people are worried about TikTok being banned. What's your prediction?
That is a really hard question because we are now have a change of government, and it was the Biden administration that brought the ban about. And the Trump administration had concerns about TikTok, but at the end of that administration, they were more lenient on TikTok. So it's very interesting to think about what will Trump do. But I would like to address, if I may, a little bit about my concern about what I'm seeing on TikTok and what I'm seeing from Gen Z specifically, and their anger towards this ban. And I understand it. I mean, please, I'm not trying to build a brand or become a social media influencer specifically. But if I had spent my youth trying to build a brand and suddenly it was going to be all taken from me, and something that I had invested in and other people had got accustomed to viewing, and it's a habit and everyone likes it, it's kind of hard to take that away.
Right.
So I have a lot of sympathy for the people right now that are in pain with the idea of having their platform taken. In fact, some of our closest friends to our cause and who are helping us with protecting children, I mean, they too have been demonetized on YouTube. And in fact, they just got remonetized on YouTube after a year. And it's a big deal for them because it means with the monetization, they can actually help people. And if what we forget is that while we're censoring and telling people what you can say and not say, there are people that actually get hurt that are trying to do a lot of good. And they get hurt because censorship cuts both ways. And sometimes the good gets censored while you're trying to figure out who's the good and the bad. So what I've noticed specifically, going back to TikTok, we have that strange phenomena starting to occur where good people are going to be hurt and bad people are actually going to finally get their reward, which is to be deplatformed by having TikTok maybe taken from them. But who are the bad actors? And why does this matter? And why am I asking everyone to be a little sympathetic to the US government? First of all, I don't believe the government is so worried about TikTok taking down the US government or taking down our system of governance. I heard that case made by a college student, and I was truly, Kim, surprised, shocked at how she vehemently made this whole dissertation about how American government should treat its people with the respect of allowing them to make decisions, and that if TikTok is bad, it's up to them, the people, to make the decision if it's bad, and how dare the government step in and tell us what we can and cannot do. And if it's Chinese, who cares? But the fundamental problem is that in China, they have the Chinese TikTok, but they're not allowed to actually criticize their government. In fact, what this young lady did in China would have her arrested. So yeah, I have a problem when I have a beautiful young lady talking about stuff that ultimately at the end of the day, she's missing a few incredibly important points. Because we're not worried about China just militarily or competitively. We're worried about China because of the actions China's taken against people. And for whatever harm you think America's done, the best thing I can say to prove my point is not to try to prove it beyond say, then how come are we the most sought after country in the world for people to immigrate to? And actually, Kim made that point to me. And I think it's a great way just to surmise the argument. So if anyone thinks America is such a bad place, well, the rest of the world disagrees with us because we're only almost 320 million Americans approximately. And the truth is we're a minority throughout the whole world. There's many countries larger than us. And we're not geopolitically, there's not that many of us. So the truth is Americans need to reconsider this idea of who are good actors and bad actors, because China has proven with its own firewall and to what it's done to its own people that it doesn't have the best interests at heart of its own people. So when we are worried about what TikTok is doing to our society, it's not that we're worried about the degenerative videos, because people forget about the 60s. They forget there's been other eras and prohibition and the wild 20s. America has many times gone one direction and then the pendulum swung to the other direction. So this whole idea that what's happening now is more revolutionary than what happened in the past is actually kind of incorrect. But what is occurring today is people are less familiar with history. So going back to this young woman, what I found so sad is that she is literally only showing the Chinese government her entitlement. She's showing that she can't live without TikTok, even if TikTok is bad, even if TikTok is against her country. Who cares? If the country is too fragile to deal with it, who cares? I hope everyone realizes that's a fundamental problem. I do care. I do care that this young lady doesn't have any respect for her country and believes her country's bad. I do care that she doesn't care about what China does. And I do care when she says that TikTok should just be left alone. Now, I want to make it clear, I don't want to ban TikTok. But there's so many ways we could take care of TikTok without banning it. And there are so many ways this could be handled in a just way. And one of the ways that could be done is you don't have to divest ByteDance of their investment in TikTok, but you could put a board of governance into the United States, and you could make sure all the servers were based in the United States for American data. And if you really wanted to, you could firewall the crap out of it, because China's proven they can do it to a whole country. I'm sure we could do it with TikTok. So banning is really not an issue. So the banning is not because of technology, everyone. Banning is because China is a bad actor on the world scene.
So let's break that down for people who don't understand, because to your point, a lot of people don't have conclusive information about what's really happening here. What do people need to know about any data security risks with TikTok, and what do you recommend as solutions to those problems?
Well, the problem is we don't know how bad the problem is. So when you're asking how much information does ByteDance have compared to, or Tencent have over us, I don't know. But what I do know is this: Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and all of the outfits in America are doing the same type of spying that Tencent is doing, and they're all using the serial ID of your Bluetooth identification from your phone that identifies the phone to the world. They're using that number to basically amass a whole bunch of data. They claim it's anonymous, but come on. I mean, you just have to check the serial number to the owner to figure that out. So the bottom line here is everyone's doing the same thing. So to basically look at TikTok and go, TikTok is singularly bad, it's not true.
Right. My confusion, I think a lot of other people's is this really the root cause of the issues we should be most concerned about? Because if China makes a lot of our tech, including SIM cards and other devices, they could easily gain access to the same intel without TikTok. The other layer of that is a lot of what they're calling TikTok refugees. A lot of people are now migrating to the actual Chinese version of TikTok. So not only is it not something we understand, it's not something we control. The other layer of that is that we've seen in other age verification and ban type efforts, VPN surges. The use of VPN surges.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is very funny to me. The banning of Pornhub in Texas, and then Pornhub decides to shut down, and then the VPN surges in Texas as people are escaping Texas to other places with VPN to actually watch their porn. I mean, it's really kind
That's
of
happened in
crazy.
every state where they've
Yes.
pulled out of, right?
Absolutely. And Pornhub has not really seen a depreciative amount of porn because people use VPNs to get around the restrictions.
And VPNs can open people up to a whole other layer of data risk. Is that right?
Correct. In fact, well, I mean, forgive me, in Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity, I have a whole chapter in which I talk about my son opening a VPN up in our house. And he did some harm to us. And in fact, we had to burn a whole email address because of the damage he created. So the thing is that VPNs are dangerous because if you're anonymizing yourself and you get into a dangerous situation, you have to appreciate that the people you're playing around with are a lot smarter usually than you are. So you're inviting yourself into places that you really have no business being in. You don't want to play around with a black hacker, someone who's really good at cyber bullying, terrorism, being able to hack things, because those people have a mission, and their mission is to basically take down your lock or your fence or your gate in any way they can, because that's how they get their merits. That's how they gain accolades in the community, is how they can hack into things. So we are in a war. So going back to TikTok, because I really want to answer this question. TikTok in itself is dangerous because in America, the actual concepts by which it operates, in other words, there's a whole bunch of censorship policies that TikTok has made for themselves. And that means they're willing to allow so many things on their platform, and they will censor certain things on their platform. Well, what's interesting is TikTok has actually literally been one of the most open platforms where you can see the most amount of content, which is absolutely true, with an audience of 2 billion people. And you can see more content on TikTok than pretty much any other platform on planet Earth. Everything goes. The fact that they got rid of the short version of videos to make educational videos, to make long form videos, short-term videos, and then monetization videos, and brought business in, they in many ways, they have shown Google up, they have shown YouTube up, because actually they're doing a better job than YouTube did, and their growth is faster than YouTube's. So the truth of the matter is when you look at TikTok, you have to take you'd be disingenuous if you did not agree that the creators of TikTok did a masterful job, because they've created a platform that never stops. The cycle of it's repeating all the time. It's beautifully addicting. It keeps your eyeballs grabbed, and they make a lot of money. And yet, funnily enough, they're still figuring out ways to monetize it. It's not as profitable as they'd like it to be. But what we have to realize is, it's going back to this lady, very upset, talking about how weak the US government is to ban TikTok. I'm sorry, I disagree completely with that statement. I think the hardest thing for a government to do is to go to the people and say, we're taking something away you like, because this fundamentally, we need to send a lesson to another country, because that country is banning and hurting people. And if we allow them to make money off of Americans, we're empowering them to hurt their own people.
So I understand that logic, but is TikTok the main way China makes money off America? My counterpoint to that would be yes, and China's making money off of us in so many ways, has so much access to our data, the SIM cards, the tech that we use. They could spy on us and listen to us in every other way possible. Is TikTok really the root cause, or in your opinion, what should we really be concerned about?
Well, honestly, if I was negotiating and I was the government, it would be such a simple negotiation for me. Okay, China, you can have TikTok, we want X. And if you want to keep your version of TikTok, we want to keep our version of X. So no censorship of X and no censorship of TikTok. Now you've got a real discussion. See, what people have to realize is our government is only retaliating for the firewall. So TikTok is not the issue. The issue is X can't be there, Instagram can't be there, Meta can't be there. So why don't I just hope people realize, so you don't care that no other American company can do social media in China, but China can come in and dominate our social media. And they have made it very clear they don't want our social media because they don't want our democratic messages. I have a problem with that. And I hope that people will start to wake up and realize that this isn't about TikTok. This is about fairness. So if I was American president, I would go, all right, guys, open it up. We'll open it up to you. You open it up to us. And by the way, what about us having an exchange of ideas? Let us have our American ideas and you have your communist ideas. And let the ideas win through the forum of openness and transparency. That's a discussion I would like to have. So to your point, Kim, that's my point, is I would like to see X opened up, give TikTok its due, and honor TikTok for its technology prowess, because it's a wonderful platform. Yeah. I mean, again, one thing as a technologist, I did not start this next chapter of my life trying to protect children and helping people with thinking that, I mean, how do I say this in a really nice way? Is that technology is something that I adore. I'm not here to destroy the very thing that's made me happy throughout my whole life. But to say we need a survival guide, to say that we now need to figure out ways to be safe around it, and now after the drones and the hysteria around drones, which really goes to show you that, most people never look up. I mean, we talk about this, but you never look up. And then one day you look up and everything looks like a drone because you have not realized that the airways have got at least 1,000 times more congested than they were just 30 years ago. 1,000 times more congested. And if you haven't looked up in a while, it might appear like there's a lot of lights up there and they're all moving. What the heck's going on? I'm being a bit facetious, but we don't look up. So the people that are complaining about TikTok, first of all, some of you are going to be hurt. I'm sorry. It sucks. But some of you have to realize that hurt is predicated on how many X people got hurt, how many Instagram people got hurt, how many Americans are not allowed to influence China. And that is why I believe in my heart this is okay, but I wish we were negotiating to open up our platforms in China instead of just banning their platforms. See, I think it's such a better discussion and argument to go after China going, we don't want to ban you, open up X, open up Instagram, open up Meta, open up Blue Sky, and then we're okay.
Is that a position that the government should take?
I think so.
Negotiating platform use?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the world really needs this. I think we need to open up fascist, communism, all of these different ideologies to open scrutiny. See, I'm not one of censorship.
Well, that's freedom of speech.
That's freedom of speech.
Right.
Because I think that ultimately democracy and capitalism wins out. And it's not, guys, because it's better. It's just because it's the one system that somehow has been able to cobble together enough people's agreements around the world to make things work. And it goes back to the analogy that I have in my book, the analogy of the pencil. No one realizes, and you probably have never thought about this, but what does it take to make one single pencil? And back in the 1800s and 1700s, it took a worldwide effort to get rubber, copper, and wood and lead for the actual pencil, the less phosphate. I mean, that stuff was hard. And it took a worldwide global effort to make one pencil. And we have forgotten that we do live in a worldwide economy and we need each other. And so that is why I would prefer to see transparency, because the conflict between Muslims and Christians and Catholics and now Buddhists and so on and so forth, this stuff is only going to get worse because we have more and more people on this planet. The Middle East is a shambles, and we've got Russia now that's gone back to orthodoxy. and at the same time is finding religion, but they're also finding their imperial roots again. And then in addition to that, a lot of people are now going to consider America imperialistic because we want Greenland and we want the Panama Canal, etc. But the truth is, if you want to summarize this, and this doesn't come from me, this comes from a conservative scholar, Dr. Steve Turley. This is really populism occurring around the world. This is the idea that governments have failed, so the people have risen, and now the people want their countries to be honored. So going back to the TikTok ban, and I'm trying to bring this full circle because I really wanted to answer the question correctly. This is really a patriotism ban. And what we're really saying to China is, hey guys, you can't ban all of us, our stuff, and then want your best stuff to be in America. And that is really what the ban is about. And ultimately, I would love to see China open up our social media, and then I'd be happy to have TikTok and any of their apps in America. Tumi, all of this stuff. It's been great. Did I say that right? Tumi, yeah, Tumi, their e-commerce site. I mean, we're even banning that. So, because of our trade agreements. So the bottom line is, to everyone listening to me, especially if any young people have still kept into this conversation, I understand the pain. I get it. And I think it sucks. And I think a lot of people are going to get hurt in order to fix things. But my question to you is, would you be willing to have the courage to go on the Chinese TikTok and say, hey guys, in China, why don't you open up all of your social media to our social media, and we'd love to have you. I dare you. See what happens. So bottom line here is, I love how Americans have the courage to speak their truths. But guys, in China, you can't do that. You will be arrested. A billionaire who owned Abu Dhabi, May. This billionaire spoke up once that he felt China had some economic issues they had to deal with. And then he was disappeared, and his whole his whole empire was divided into 6 different empires. He comes out after 6 months, kind of like saying, I love the CCP, I love China, and I love everything. Well, guys, he literally had his whole life's work destroyed because he basically spoke up to the CCP, and now they told him how he can live his life. In fact, they're telling him how much money he's allowed to have. Some people might think that's great until it's you. So from my perspective, I think when I look at China, and I know I used a really wild story of a billionaire, but it goes all the way down the line. China just wiped out private tutors because students wanted to be private tutored so they would get an edge. And China says, no, we do not want any students to have an edge, so they got rid of private tutors in the country. And this is the country that you guys want us to honor by allowing them to have their best platform in our country. And most of you are of that age where those tutors would have made you smarter so that you could get better jobs. But in China, you're not allowed to have that anymore. My point is, you need to do some homework to realize our government doesn't always do things just because we're mean-spirited. And when China does mean-spirited things, why do they never get busted for being mean-spirited, but America gets busted for everything we do?
So can you explain what you mean by that? America gets busted for a lot, but China often doesn't?
Yeah, I love talking about this with a lot of people because people really get so indignant about how the United States is conducting itself, and we put America on such a pedestal, and we expect America to be perfect as a country. And believe me, I think compared to what I've seen around the world, America is pretty perfect. But again, I've had the luxury and I have gratitude for it, for being able to travel around the world and see with my own eyes different cultures and different places. So when China gets rid of X or Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram in China, it's interesting that the Western media reports it as China, to protect their government, to protect their system of governance, has decided to ban our apps. And it's reported upon that China is honoring their culture and that it's okay for them to do it because, after all, they're allowed to make those decisions for their culture. But what is ironic is then when we try to equalize the playfield by saying, well, then why should they have their apps in the United States? We Americans will tend to look at this as a game of fairness. And we go, well, we should be fair. If we want to set an example to the world, we should have TikTok in the United States. But the truth is, that's not how it works. The more fair America has been throughout the world, the more America's been taken advantage of. And when I say America's being taken advantage of, I'm talking about America's paying more money to protect other countries. America has given technology to China, unlike any other technological transfer in the history of the world. We have helped Japan after World War II to rebuild themselves. And these people then have become incredibly aggressive competitors later on, forgetting about who helped them. And what's ironic is when we tell our own population that China's really being unfair to American business, our own population would prefer to beat on us for not being fair, but they don't ever seem to side with China not being fair. And I believe that's because in America we're so entitled to wanting what we want that we don't put our entitlement before a love of country. And because World War II and the fight for our freedom, the fight for the very world, is so ancient, I don't think modern people can appreciate why older people are worried about freedom, are worried about rights being eroded. And when China takes away our ability to do commerce in that country, takes our ability away to actually bring our culture to that country, and then we're supposed to allow them to bring their culture to our country, I think that's a point in which I believe we could do a fairer exchange, which is if you want TikTok in the US, I want X and Meta and Instagram in China. And I'd be happy with that. Now, is TikTok a security risk? The number one question you've asked. So, we know that AT&T was in collusion with Meta and obviously Instagram and all the subsidiaries of Meta. We know that our US government has spied on us in so many different ways, and different reports have come out. So what is the difference between us spying on ourselves than complaining about Tencent spying on us, the owners of TikTok? It's the same spying, because ultimately what Tencent wants to know is what motivates us. Now, the government is worried that if the Chinese government knows all of our motivators, they could influence us and influence our elections. And there is some credence to that. But the truth is, Meta and these other companies are already doing this to our elections, and those are homebrewed companies. Yeah. So ultimately, and this has all come out recently, it's very difficult to consider Tencent really an enemy when Meta did the same thing. And I Zuckerberg on an apology tour of what he did. So again, going back to this premise of, is this fair that we ban TikTok? I think it's completely unfair, especially for the influencers and content creators that put so much into it. But do I think it's the right thing to do in order to force equity back of us having equal platforms in the United States to China? Heck yes. And I think China needs to have its own playbook used against it. And that's what we're doing right now. Unfortunately, that hurts Americans. But guys, what if we were to open up American social media to China and allow more ideas to flood into the country? Why is that such a bad idea? And why is China so worried about our ideas? You claim, a lot of you, that the US government is so weak that it can't handle China. But everyone, China has banned all American apps, and you don't seem to have a problem with that. So if we're that weak, then China is 100 times weaker. And you want that country to still have the ability to use one of its best cash cows on the American people when we know that in China, the same app actually magnifies the best values of the country, and the same app in the United States goes after the worst values of our country because that sells. But in China, they're not worried about sales. They're worried about making China look good, about making products that have patriotism. Do you know that when we did the chip ban in China, China gets people to buy phones out of patriotism? I wonder if Americans would buy a phone out of patriotism. Buy Apple because it's American. Don't buy a Korean phone from Samsung. So when you realize that the Chinese are incredibly patriotic and they're playing by a completely different set of rules than we are, I want the rules to be changed to be fair. And I do not want a ban of TikTok, but unless they're willing to be fair, I prefer to ban TikTok than be taken advantage of completely. And that's my stance.
Very interesting. I think one of the reasons there's so much contention around this is because you've talked a lot about truth decay, where we no longer trust each other and we don't trust our elected officials. Our elected officials seem to be laser focused on this particular app and almost ignoring every other app and every other form of data security risk. Not every, but many others that I could say could be concerning if we were to look into them. So for the people that are worried about losing TikTok, or for the people who feel almost threatened by it because of our government taking this action, focusing on this one venue, what would you say to them as far as looking ahead? Let's call it a message of hope.
Several things. In America so far, when we ban Pornhub, you can use a VPN to bounce into another place and see Pornhub. I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to use VPNs to still see TikTok if it's banned, because it will still be present in Canada or Mexico or other places. Then you have a whole bunch of expats that go down to the Mexican TikTok or the Canadian TikTok and whatever. It doesn't matter. So a complete ban is impossible. So I think, that's a little far-fetched. But I think people have to realize that I agree with the idea that of the youth saying this is kind of silly. It is silly. It's retaliatory. It is, it all is retaliatory. But what people have to appreciate in geopolitical politics is that if you give an inch, other countries take a yard. And China basically asked America 30 years ago to come into the country and invest a lot of money, and will you please allow us to build your products? And we said yes. And then China made a rule that we had to give them 50% of the technological patents that we were building so that they could be prosperous later. And we agreed to that. So we built China by helping China with all of this. So it's very hard for us to be now 30 years later into this relationship and having China basically say, we're going to bury you. Because their whole basis of how they got to TikTok is based on American know-how. And so when America's being kicked out and our social media is not allowed, I want to fight back. That is not based on a emotional argument. This is not based on a TikTok love or is TikTok bad or any of that. It's to do with taking TikTok from China hurts them enough to make them aware that they got to do something fair, which is allow us to have our apps in China. That's my opinion.
I agree with that. Do you think there are other apps we should be more concerned about or other technologies that are probably more problematic than TikTok?
Well, as I have my iPad right in front of me in my notes today, one of the things I was looking at is, so what would I suggest today? So let me say this. When you go on social media, any of you, and you become an influencer and you start to gain traction after 250,000 people, and you start to grow into a 500,000, and then you get to 1 million, what you have to realize is you are actually in the old cable system, of cable television. You're actually scoring the same amount of hits that a cable channel would score to be considered doing well. If a cable channel is doing 500,000, it was really doing well. I'm not talking about the big channels. I'm talking about the standard channel. If you had 300 channels, if you got 300,000 people, that's a good day. So my point to everyone is that what influencers forget is that when you start to influence more than a football stadium's worth of people at one time, you start to get scrutinized by more people. And the more people that you get scrutinized, eventually the more people you will find dislike what you're doing. It's just natural. It's actually, unfortunately, statistics. So ultimately, what you have to realize is, to all of you young creators, is that the more you expose yourself, the more likely something's going to go wrong. So when you're asking what app's going to get you into trouble, well, the truth is any one of them. And more importantly, it is how foolish are you to post your extreme content that could get you into trouble. And if you do choose to post extreme content that could get you into trouble, and both Kim and I know about that because we've done it, then you also have to be willing to face the consequences of that. And I think today people are really not understanding that the two factors in social media that I can't get over is what you post today will be there tomorrow and indefinitely into the future. That is something that no human really understands. How often have you been angry and you've said something you regret? But in social media, you not only said it and you regret it, but you can never take it away. So my biggest problem with TikTok is that people seem to be drunk when they're using TikTok. And I don't mean physically drunk. They just seem to be drunk on the idea we can do anything on TikTok. This is the free place. Let's go. Party time. There's only one problem. Eventually, when you're trying to get a job, or eventually when people are trying to decide if they want to do business with you, they're going to look at all those posts, and then your judgment day comes. And that's why those platforms to me are evil, because most people are not aware of the damage they're doing just with the posting they do at a party.
But is that the platform's fault, or is that our responsibility?
It's our responsibility.
I agree.
And that's what we're trying to teach. I mean, that's what you Absolutely. And I are doing.
Right.
To wrap up the TikTok controversy, this is my wrap up. This is, the message to everyone. TikTok is not dangerous. If TikTok is dangerous, then Instagram, Meta, and all other social media platforms are equally as dangerous. But TikTok is behind a regime, behind a government that has censored all of our social media platforms. And as far as I'm concerned, unless they're willing to open up China to American social media, I do not want to see their very best be able to have a platform in our country and us not have any platforms in their country. So, from my perspective, this is not a ban on TikTok because TikTok is bad. This is really a ban on the CCP being able to ban everything American, and yet we are willing to be fair and let anything Chinese into our country. At some point, you have to say no. And I think this is a time for us to say no. However, if I was the government, my message would be totally different than our government. It would be something like this. Look, guys, I want to have TikTok in our country, and I want China and America to get along. So you let our social media on your platforms uncensored. We'll let your platforms on ours uncensored, and that will allow transparency, and let's let whatever political system win. Because with transparency, there can also be cooperation and understanding. So to me, if I was going to solve this problem, I would go to China and say, let me have X, let me have Meta, let me have Facebook, and you can have your TikTok and whatever other platforms you would like. And I think that's fair. What do you guys think?